Hello there, this is the voice of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, a series of 12 remarkable conversations that I'm having with male soul stewards from all over the world, these extraordinary men who are transmitting unconditional love, empathy, and vast waves of spiritual intelligence, encouraging us, inspiring us, enthusing us into living a new level of living, and thereby creating a brave new world. Welcome to everybody. What's happening is that my wonderful tech manager is just sorting us out, ladies and gentlemen. If you're tuning in, and you'll recognize the wonderful Ron Damico sitting in front of you. And yeah, I think, yes. Hi, Yasmin. Well, obviously, Ron will remember you.
Yes.
Yasmin, you remember Yasmin was working at that, went on retreat in Egypt, was working for the UN and living in Cairo. Yasmin is now very successfully in Washington, D.C., working for Home Security. Is that not right, Yasmin? Yasmin's having a wonderful time.
Great.
Hello, Eileen. Wonderful, wonderful people. And Jackie, you're being so faithful. Thank you so much, all these wonderful people. At the moment, I can't quite scroll down because my tech manager is still sorting us out. But I have a feeling that we're okay. Is he still here? I think we're okay. Well, it's 28:32 here, so we're 2 minutes into our show. So should we dive in, dear Ron?
Of course.
So, ladies and gentlemen, officially, I'm not going to go through a really long bio because you've met Ron before. And I know that you're all tuning into the record or the library of all these extraordinary deep dialogues that these wonderful people are joining me in. And so you can easily go to dianathevoiceofchange.com, not now, but later, and seek out Ron's bio. And I'll make sure, of course, that in our after dialogue chat, it's there. But Ron is an extraordinary energy catalyst and unique empathic healer who I've had the great grace of knowing since the beginning of this decade. I think we met around 2013, didn't we? So
yeah, we did.
It feels much longer because we're soul brothers. It feels as though I've known him all my life, but it's probably since 2013 that I came to the center, didn't I?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if any of you are actually in Connecticut, Ron is in central Connecticut, am I right? Or
Actually, I'm down by the coast now. I'm in Lyme, Connecticut. But everything I do now is remotely as a result of COVID. So it works out that it's just gotten so convenient. You get to stay at home and do everything you do from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Ron can easily be found at rondamico.com. Not now, but later.
Yes, afterwards, please.
Yeah. So, Ron, welcome from the bottom of my soul and the very core of my heart. It's absolutely wonderful to be here with you. And when we were speaking in our pre-show chat last week, we decided that we needed to enter into the substance of mystical relationships.
Yes.
How's your relationship with the world at the moment? I mean, there's a tremendous amount going on. So we start there.
Well, as I've been sitting with the whole dynamic, we are at odds with ourselves. In every way we can possibly think of, we are showing where there has been a warring faction within. We're getting very clear, and it's been amplifying how we have to make a decision. Are we going to live within the primitive of what we've always known, that survival-based focal point and mentality, or are we going to allow ourselves to evolve to the next state of living where it's about thriving? It's about recognizing that if we can go in to this next phase of human growth, recognizing the balance within us, that dynamic relationship within, if we can reconcile that, we can then start bringing forth that reconciliation through every relationship that we have out here. But and I'm going to use this term, we're at a crisis of faith.
Mm.
Okay. And it's the faith of knowing who we are as individuals. We're really torn between, are we just human? Are we just a biological form? Or is there something more to us? And that more is what's beginning to surface for people. And a lot of people are finding it very difficult to avoid that truth. We like our biological form. We like fitting in. We like, working with the crowd, so to speak. But what I'm finding is that isn't working for people anymore. No matter how desperately they want to hold on to it, it's not helping them have the quality of life that we've been able to create in the past. Now we're looking at a different type of quality. So with what is going on, especially with the geopolitical situation that we're looking at, and especially in this country, in the United States, this is about making a choice. How do we want to live? Do we want to thrive, or do we want to just continue to survive? And that's where the struggle is. So it's very interesting how we are moving in the direction of thriving. We just don't fully realize that yet.
I hear you, and I completely concur with what you're saying. And because of our own unique disciplines, I have a measuring which I feel is part of what you're also describing to us, but also maybe is an extrapolation of what you're saying. And I feel that you see that through all of the socialization processes that we've been through, all the educational processes, which of course, as we're seeing, are rooted so firmly within the five major establishments. That what's actually been designed for us is to describe internally and externally what we are, rather
Yes.
than who we are.
Okay.
And now here we are waking up to the fact that we are not what they say we are.
Right.
Even to the most ridiculous things. I remember when I was a child at high school, when we got to the 14, 15, 16-year-old stage, which
Yeah.
actually from a cognitive resonance point of view is a really interesting period, because it's when this chakra really begins to open, the ajna opens. And of course, the ajna, as we know, is all about developing objectivity about our world. So often around 14, 15, 16, it's when we say, oh, no, I'm going to be a Buddhist, and we've been brought up a Christian, or no, I'm not eating meat, I'm becoming a vegetarian, or no, I'm going to be a vigilante, or I think I'll become a prostitute, or whatever outrageous thing that we do to try and claim whom we are. It can be outrageous, or it can be, within the confines of social normalcy. But actually now it seems what we're doing, and of course, as a result of that, we're either forced into the streams of, here are the scientists and here are the artists. And if you don't fit into either box, then you're a hairdresser. I've worked extensively in the hairdressing industry over the years. And I mean, this is what's always being said, because essentially they're right brain people who are immensely creative, but actually found cognitive work extraordinarily difficult. Anyway, so example quoted. So it feels that we're being challenged because we're no longer in connection or full connection with what the world says we are, because
Yes.
we're looking in scorn, in derision, in division, in contempt, or in disdain at the five major establishments, because we no longer believe in the productivity of their statement, of the philosophy, the ideals, or the ethos that they're creating. And as you were saying, the chaos in the geopolitical departments. Well, I suppose of all the five great establishments, that has to shake first, doesn't it?
Yep.
And then it becomes, and medicine is also being shook.
Yes.
And then, of course, money or corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll be education, and then finally religion.
Yes.
In order to understand, where is my divinity? So I thought it was wonderful what you said. I just wanted to sort of share on my own
Yeah.
level that maybe that
Absolutely.
pins, or not pins, but gives earth to what we were sharing as an ideal.
Yeah.
As a spiritual person of great discipline, and your devotion is remarkable. Um, what could you offer us as a technique or an awareness or a sensation or indeed a meditation that would help us understand more about how we can move into the process of thriving and therefore staunch the fear of surviving, knowing full well that the universe is always going to look after us because it's completely
Mhm.
self-correcting and completely self-organizing. So, I feel that's what our who bit, we're being encouraged to tune into the divine, to lean into the divine, as the contemporary parlance suggests. I like that idea of leaning in, that we don't just have to do it all alone. That's narcissism. But if we can actually not, but do it co-creatively rather than codependently. Was there anything that
Yeah,
popped?
I love what you're talking about. Excuse me. Because the dynamic that we're looking at is how do we actively remember who we are? How do we actively align with the aspect of our being that breathes life into our biology?
Mm,
Because the very thing you're talking about and what I was talking about with regards to surviving and thriving, if we recognize that survival occurs because the human form has felt isolated and alone for whatever the motives were that created that isolatory dynamic, it's if we can recognize that there is more to us than we
mm,
realize is just that three-dimensional biological force.
mm,
And most everybody at some level is tapping into the fact there's got to be something more. And it's not because this is less, it's just that it's more of an expression of something that's incomplete
mm,
because you're only bringing a partial aspect of yourself forward instead of the full force of what you have the ability to be. So if we could focus, and really it's a very simple act, but it takes consistency and patience.
mm,
It's recognize that somewhere, some point within your life, something drew you to step outside of the boundaries of what you knew, what you were taught, how you were raised, that said, everything in my life taught me this, but something internally is saying, I need to do this.
mm,
It may defy logic and reason. It may have a logic and a reasonable component to it. But it's that inner voice that is just very clear and very calm. And all it says is over here,
mm,
or just listen. And like you said, lean into me,
mm.
because that's the voice of our essence. That's the voice of our soul.
And what's wonderful, sorry,
No, please.
I just wanted to sort of emphasize what you're sharing because I feel it's absolutely quintessential. That wow, wonderful mug! Look at that mug, everybody.
Isn't it
Show it
beautiful?
again. That wonderful mug. Isn't that extraordinary? I want one. That's amazing. Gosh, that's fantastic. Um, that actually you're referring it's what you're referring to essentially
Mhm.
is described in many different ways in all of the major philosophies and all of the great faiths, both within the exo and the esoteric practice, that really what we're talking about is that moral coda that we all have deep within us, that I believe we're born with. I believe that we
Yes.
are children of God, and that we have this spiritual toolkit deep within us, which generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, is endorsed through our childhood, through the love of our mothers, through the love
Yes.
of female aspects of our lives, where we're nurtured and brought into the realm of what it is to share on very, very deep relationship levels and given parameters or boundaries about what it is to receive and what it is to take.
Yeah.
We all have this. It's just that when we leave the beautiful, comfortable, hopefully safe confine of home and we go to school, it's knocked out of us. I was having a conversation with a client of mine who's 20 years of age and a very brilliant young man who is his dad is a client of mine. He sent him to me for mentoring, and he's really brilliant and highly articulate. and so sensitive. So we talk a
Yeah.
lot about how he can manage his kindness in the world,
Yeah.
because he shows the infinite sensitivity of his being with me, and how it actually is a portal into his creativity, and the
Yeah.
way that he's beginning to vision the world in all of its ugliness and all of its beauty. The
Hmm.
difficulty is, as he expresses, that he can't do this all the time, he said to me. And I said, well, why not? He said, because immediately I go into my peer group, they're all in attitude, being gruff, saying, what are you talking about? What are you doing that for? You know?
Yeah.
So his texts are just da 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 da, like machine gun
Yeah.
bullets. And I'm saying, no, I want you to, when you send me a text, I want you to write, Stewart, blessings to you. Leave the message and then love or thanks. Don't put regards. Put blessings, love, om, whatever you like.
Hmm.
And he's really beginning to awaken to it. Now, there's a sort of prime example for this. Anyway, I wanted to ask you a question. So recognizing that we all have this inherent,
Hmm.
quintessential spiritual code or moral code, how can we get to touch into it much more? I mean, the obvious answer is meditation.
Yeah.
Do you have
Without
any
question.
highlights?
Well, it's interesting. I think there are a number of ways to go into it. Meditation is one. Breath within a meditative process or a focused process is incredibly important. And the reason I love to focus on breath is because we look at it as a biological action. But truth be told, if you look at breath, the whole of the universe breathes constantly. Everything is an exchange at some level, in some fashion or form, and various types, too numerous for us to even entertain. There is a continual exchange going on. And if we can activate that consciously, if we can choose to purposefully engage that exchange through our respiration,
Right.
we open up that portal for us to feel beyond just the three-dimensional realm that we exist in. And we begin to stretch outside of that, moving into that transitionary state of what I'm going to call the fourth dimensional reality, into where it is that we actually, when we hit that fifth dimension, we begin to tap into the essence of our soul. We begin to feel the very nature of what breathes forth the essentials for this biology to take the shape and the form that it does.
Mm.
And it's all about the relational dynamics that are occurring. And the relationship of exchange is paramount. When you're talking about that individual, that young man, as he's going through this, he's leaning into one facet of himself when he's with his friends. And then when he's with you, he pulls himself not over to the other extreme, but he brings himself to his center point, which respects that edge and then the softer edge. But it brings a beautiful meeting in the middle for him to get to know the dynamics of both aspects of what he has the ability to bring forth and draw on. So if we can focus on our breath and engage our breath, and I've talked about it last time, it's like if we can focus on breathing and being present in the mundane tasks, the everyday, day in and day out, you're activating your soul at a conscious level through your biology. You're asking your soul to say, I want you to drive this biology into this simplistic act, which is an act of grace. Because I am involved in it, because it is part of what it is that we have created in this world. This act of cleaning this glass is an act of grace. Putting something away is an act of honoring and respect for what we've created, who we are, how we are, what we are. It pulls in all facets of our life to do that.
And so as a result, because I feel that the way that I interpret or measure what you're sharing with us is how I teach flow. And that
Yes.
when we move into the flow of breath, and I was just thinking of you very close to the coast, and how I know how you love nature, how you adore nature, and how you are devoted to nature, that in your walks into the wildness or the calmness of nature, I'm sure that being near to the ocean, you're really feeling the flow of the ocean, the flow of the waves as they move onto the beach or onto the rocks and then surge out again. And that is
Absolutely.
our breath. And that we're really talking about the fact that in our urban communities, or through stress, or through panic, because we're not doing what they say we should be doing, and so we suddenly become full of shame and denial and guilt,
Yeah,
that we move away from the essential nature of the way that nature will always lead us. And
exactly.
as a result of that, we can move beyond the darkness of the seen premise of just surviving in the urban moments into
Yes.
something where we go towards the light beyond. And
Hmm.
so we begin through flow to go towards higher intelligence.
Yes.
Because I don't feel we no longer really sit. I remember as a child sitting in church and being in absolute wonder and awe at the crucifixion
Hmm.
and at the stained glass windows and all of the angels and the beautiful music that was being sung. That always elevated or uplifted me. I don't
Hmm.
feel we do this either in church, in tabernacle, in temple, or in synagogue. We don't really do these
No,
today.
we don't engage it enough in life. We don't look at life as our temple, as our church.
No.
We don't look at as that communion with God. We don't
Mm,
see that. But
mm,
everything we are, everything we do is that communal point.
mm,
You're talking about the ocean. I mean, literally, it's right down the street from me. But what I've grown to recognize is how much are we water? We're 97% water. So within that, if we recognize the moisture in the air, we notice when it's humid, when it's not as humid. That's another form of ebb and flow. You look at the temperature shifts and changes. You look and pay attention to the cyclical nature of the moon. We're coming into the new moon on Friday. If we would just every day tap into all of the fluid resources that are the earth on its axis in relationship to the sun, the moon in relationship to us, that dance of all of these individualized yet interdependent entities, we're talking celestial bodies. They have a presence in and of themselves. They are an expression of a unique source and form.
mm,
And they
mm,
relate with themselves, they relate with everything around them. Sometimes it just blossoms and it creates life. Sometimes it creates what we would call cataclysms. But is it
mm,
really cataclysms, or is it just another transformational process to break free some energy that's congested that needs to be moved for something else? This is the life process. And that flow pattern that you brought up is quintessentially important. And then the other thing that comes up as I'm speaking, it's when we allow ourselves to settle into our true nature, the fullness of who we are, human and soul, a marriage. As we do that, when we commune through our voice, that is the essence of who we are, creating the words and the intonations. This is a delivery system of life, but it also can be a delivery system of death, depending on the intent. But if we are choosing to live and breathe life and the process of life, every word we bring forth offers an opportunity for more life to be had, for things to transform and transcend into something different. And you being, the voice coach that you are, and what you do with sound, that dynamic, when somebody begins the process of mastering that, they gain control of their own environment again. They get to know themselves in more of a balanced fashion. So when they communicate, they're tapping into the feminine and the masculine divine within as they bring forth what they're sharing. And that's the beauty of the dance.
This is wonderful because it gives us the one most beautiful segue into
Yeah.
what we wanted to subscribe to or ascend to in our conversation, was the nature of how we can see mystical or mythic counterparts from
Yeah.
an archetypal point of view appearing on our landscape
Yeah.
we're thinking more about the macroscopic landscape rather than the micro. But of course, we're seeing it in our own lives, in our own immediate environments. But of course, here, what's been enumerated is so beautiful because the key mystical relationship that we have is how our consciousness, I would suggest spirit,
Hmm.
the consciousness and the awareness of mind as being complete, those 100 trillion cells that we have in our bodies, that we then address what is my body doing in this moment?
Yes.
How does it feel full because I've just eaten lunch? How does it feel empty? The ebb and the flow. Am I breathing in the way that as I enumerate what I'm saying, as I express what I'm saying, am I getting the responses that I want? Therefore, what is the ebb and flow of my relationships? So in other words, what we're really what I feel that we're nudging ourselves towards is that the greatest mystical relationship that we have with God is actually within ourselves. It's not on the outer part. But then, of course, there is the higher intelligence, so to speak, that we can go to as an aspirational route, where we open up our devotion and our dedication and our discipline. And of course, what we were commenting on in our pre-show chat was the way that we're seeing mythic counterparts
Yes.
on the landscape out there. You were so brilliant when we were talking that I wanted to return you to that point. Forgive me, I just need to switch this off.
Sure.
I've forgotten I did not switch off my emails. I don't want them pinging all the time. Um, and I think I just casually said to you, isn't it extraordinary how Harry and Meghan are living within a crucible of love
Yeah.
and now seem to be in a very beautiful area of the West Coast. They're just north of Santa Barbara in Montecito, so which is where Oprah lives and Ellen DeGeneres lives, known as, a place of great luxury and great good health. And yet the world's attention on them is mostly aggravating, aggressive, and downright
Yeah.
critical.
Sure.
And so I remember I said, what do you feel that they offer us on an archetypal level? And you were absolutely brilliant. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us again.
Of course, you're absolutely sweet. I appreciate that. Um, when I look at them, what I see in them are two individuals that in their own right have walked through their growing years, gaining stability of becoming balanced individuals in their own right. Both of them have gone through their different phases of not only awakening the relationship of the masculine and feminine within them, but they've also been going through this process of reconciling the imbalances and the differences, not only from within themselves, but based on how they've been addressed from outside. Because each of them have been, I'm just going to use the word kindly, saying addressed in ways that weren't the kindest. But it's an expression of not only the imbalances that we carry, but it also is a form of aggression towards the balance that they are choosing to bring into the world. Because if we were to embrace them, not only as individuals in the balanced light that they are choosing to bring themselves forth, but what they have chosen to create as a couple, we have to begin to allow that into our lives, to check into how we have and have not lived, where our balance points are and where our instabilities are. And then through the recognition of where we just look and go, wow, I am out of balance over here, or I am deeply stable in this arena, and using both as launching tools to bring you to a greater state of grace and harmonization within. If we are to take them in instead of pushing them away and trying to find fault within their willingness to not have fault, or to honor that they do and then correct it. Because it's not because it's a failing, it's just a recognition. Oh, I'm out of balance. Thank you very much for pointing that out. and we feel what we feel. But that's the dynamic that they offer. They offer this world as, and you brought it up to me as well, but it's Michelle and Barack Obama. They also do something very similar, in that they're choosing to be that balanced couple by being balanced individuals. See, the coupling comes secondarily. It's what are you within yourself, and are you going to use that coupling to also stabilize yourself? So these are the things, and it's beautiful what they have both gone through. I mean, Harry's gone through his trials and tribulations to get him here. He's worked out some of the imbalances that he's had, and he was assaulted for it at various levels through the press. But he's come out of it a better person. He didn't use it and go to the worst of himself. He found the best of himself and then just brought that forth. And Megan was the same thing. As she started moving into this realm of marrying Harry and that relationship, they went after her, but she rose to bring the best of herself forward. She felt whichever she felt. She felt, I'm sure, whatever pain she did from people going after her. But it's one of those things where she came out of it a better and wiser and truly more graceful. And both of them are very graceful in their approaches because they just are as they are. And then they're doing the best they can to bring that balance, that beauty, that grace into everything that they do.
Fascinating. So, oh gosh, so many insights as you speak. They have been ravaged, and they have been ravaged bitterly. What's interesting is that the key ravagement, the key theme, has been racism.
Yes.
And what's also interesting from an archetypal point of view is that we know Megan is both white and black.
Yeah.
And yet the color of her skin has been the prime piece
Yeah.
of ravaging. The other thing, of course, is that how dare she step forward, appear like a social climber, meaning how dare she step forward, fall in love,
Yeah.
love to the height that she was obviously loving him and he her, because they could hardly leave themselves alone. They were always hand in hand, touching one another, which I never felt was indecorous. I never felt that it was unusual in the sense of when it becomes cloying.
Yeah.
And therefore always a statement of insecurity between the two people. I felt it was just such a wonderful sense of flow in their
Yes.
loving regard for one another and the respect that they had for one another, but also the celebration of their intimacy and how they
Yes.
were bringing it into the public domain.
Yeah.
Because after all, this is not something that is expressed within the protocol of the British royal family. People don't touch people. That was one of the great revolutions of Harry's mother. When I worked with her, she was known for the first person to touch the hand of someone with AIDS without wearing a glove.
Yeah.
It was a huge thing. But however, we're talking about mystical relevances, and that from an archetypal point of view, as you're saying, we're seeing them both celebrating the journey of their own individual hero, heroine, as they've
Yes.
been through the thickets, as they fought back the demons, as they've climbed the mountains, as they've waded through the swamps, and there are still a few more swamps for them to go through, that they're actually rising glorious. And I feel that, all of us who are listening in, if you can hold them in the position of that glory there and actually place your contempt somewhere else, like in the garbage can. Because it's not useful to any other human being. All that we're doing when we cast contempt or disdain at another human being is that effectively we're suffering ourselves. We're just making more suffering for ourselves. And cruelty starts appearing
Yes.
for the other individuals. So that's what I mean by let's place it into the garbage can. Whereas what's interesting, although they were assaulted because of the color of their skins in administration, of course, now you can see I've gone to the more mature couple
Yeah.
in the form of Barack and Michelle. Their maturity allowed them to hold a crystalline force between the two of them, which was very simply, smilingly and graciously, we will not succumb.
Yes.
And, I think Michelle's statement was always, when they go low, we go
You go
high.
high.
which is fascinating. I knew somebody in his administration who was an ex-student of mine, and that's actually how I met him one day. I think I told you the story. Actually,
Yes.
I was working with you. It was about
Mhm.
6 years ago, and this dear person who was one of his financial directors, who had trained as an actress but had never become an actress. Bless her. She found her creativity really fulfilled in Barack's administration, and she wanted a session with me, and I said, well, make sure it's not in the White House. Go home first, because security and so forth. Anyway, I came online on Zoom or Skype, and I thought, wait a minute, that's very unusual. Where is she? And there she was in the White House still. And I said, oh, I think we should finish this because of security. And she said, no, it's okay. You've been checked out. This conversation has been checked out. I've got 4 people standing outside that door. Everything is fine. And at that point, the door opened, and who walked in but Barack, in his shirt sleeves rolled up, still with a collar and tie, saying, Ashling, hey, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm Mr. President. I mean, what do you do in that moment? Stand up and do the stars and stripes, dun, 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 dun. And he came across, and she said, look, this is my master of voice from Shakespeare's Globe. Why don't you say hello? So here is Barack leaning in saying, hello there. What do you think of my voice? Anyway, the point, it's just a little bit of a story, but the point is that it seemed that he was actually able to hold his grace with such discipline and fervor that in situations where his power was really being assaulted, that he was able to disagree without being disagreeable.
Yes.
That when he was in contention, as we saw just a week ago, the contention between Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump. Now, Mr. Trump was attacking Mr. Biden all the time until the senior gentleman turned and said, oh, for God's sake, man, just shut up, which was an extraordinary moment. Perhaps not the most brilliant thing to say, bless him, but we all understood why he was saying.
Yes.
And the Trump just went on and on and on. But Barack was actually, in his gravitas, in his weight, and in this immense field of emotional intelligence, which of course
Yes.
is backed up by his spiritual intelligence, he was able to soar above, rather like an eagle. Eagles apparently never fly under the storm. They go over the storm.
Over the storm.
They can fly over the storm. So, with all of this in mind, and I know I've sort of bridged this thing that we were talking about in pre-show chat about Harry and Meghan and Michelle and Barack. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, when you started to speak of Barack, one thing that was very clear from an apolitical perspective, what he did was he did the very best he could to hold true to the compass of what his true north was and what he felt was in the greatest good of everybody in the country. But the difference with him was he was very clear, from what I can see, that it was about the world simultaneously. He never really ever separated the two out. That's what made him different from every other president prior to him in modern era. He saw himself as a global communicator. He had the ability to see the larger picture, take into consideration everything that was going on, and he brought all of himself into it. And the reason he didn't waver is because his masculine and his feminine were very well balanced. Now, when I just look at it from how I see things, Michelle being in his life helped him temper that masculine, stabilize it, anchor it, but also give it the love and the nurturing that it needed, so the sword would be only unsheathed when it needed to be, but it rarely needed to be, because he held the continence of just being onus of the balance of that masculine and feminine. And he was very good at bringing that feminine softness and compassion with the male holding the foundation for it. And then when he needed to be firm, he did it, and he came forth with that masculine, but it had that feminine softness as the delivery system. So it was more readily embraceable by anybody that wanted to find a balance point. The people that took it inappropriately or inaccurately were the ones that preferred the destabilization as opposed to that stabilizing factor. And that's part of what he and both Michelle offered was, we are going to live and be the very essence of stability, of balance, of unification. Both were unified within their own right, and they both supported each other in what they needed to get to be that, and then they became that balanced couple. And it wasn't so much that it was the masculine him and the feminine him, it was the unified presence of each that came together to create an amazing couple. And that's what Harry and Meghan are in the direction of moving towards right now. It's very obvious. They're going to be that next, at least from what I can see, they're going to be that next iteration for the younger generations of how to move more gracefully through these challenging times.
Mm, mm, mm. Well, what's fortunate is that they are supported by not just a think tank, but a social dynamic, which really of intelligent, sensitive people who really understand the stance that they're making as an anthem celebration of where their mother started 25, 30 years ago. Which I write about hugely in my book about Diana, the Voice of Change, because she was obviously an iconoclast, but interestingly, the aggravating aspects of what was taking place from an archetypal point of view around Diana was that she was loved by the public and not liked by the establishment, because there she was changing. And how dare anybody without the academic brilliance step forward and be as freeing, as liberating, and how dare she love in the way that she did. And just, so going back into the general domain, the common domain, it's very interesting, isn't it, apropos what you've just been saying about Michelle and Obama, that one of the key things that happened through Mr. Trump was that he doubted the provenance, the citizenry, the roots of Barack, because there's Barack appearing in this archetypal notion of both warrior, sovereign, and magician.
Exactly.
High priest, magician.
Mm-hmm.
And understandably, Mr. Trump would not understand that, because I don't wish to be disparaging to him, but I think his filters are quite clouded.
Mm-hmm.
So he would find that to be objectionable. And the other complaint that is thrown at Michelle is that she's a transgender man or a drag queen. Which is vilifying, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that that should be in the public domain consciousness, because the roles that they're performing, as you were saying, the roles that they're living, because it's obvious that this is not just a mental stance. It's something that they, going back to where we started in our conversation, they flow with it.
Yes.
So there may be intellectual choices being made, but actually those choices are purely celebrations of the way that they feel. And that they come together as husband and wife in this mature way. But it's a resounding success from an archetypal, mythical point of view. Therefore, they're transcendent in their mysticism. I mean, I'm sure there is not one single American citizen, unless we're dealing with somebody who is of diminished responsibility, who is not thinking, well, actually, it was very calm for 8 years during Mr. Obama's regime in comparison to what has taken place through Mr. Trump's 4 years. So I feel that that's a celebration of the maturity of the two of them, and that they were so, as you were beginning to describe about Barack, that Michelle started off being very coy and didn't really want to be first lady, and then suddenly seized the opportunity because of her work with the children, and then raised in her status and found her voice, which was really very beautiful.
Yeah.
So hopefully those observations are interesting for people as they listen. I wondered if there were any questions coming through. Maybe we should all take the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. I quite agree, Alex. I know also when my brother sitting opposite me will be as well, he'll say the same thing. Oh, thank you, Landa. Apparently we did a superb analysis of Obama, his becoming and the celebration of his balanced power. Clouded is an understatement. Right, okay. Any questions, anybody? Ron and I will carry on talking, but I'll keep my little beady eye on the chat box. Do ask questions. You're making wonderful comments, but I wonder if there are any questions you want to ask.
One of the things I would love to share is it's fascinating how once we choose as a society to breathe a movement pattern in, to break up the stagnation of a way of being, Obama came in and he was a breath of change. He was a breath of a higher way of vibrating as a human being. That permeated the global culture. So what is that going to do? That is going to bring rise to the pieces or the aspects of how we exist and what we carry that do not align with that purity. So we go through that purification or that purging process. And then what do? We bring forth opportunities for us to purge that pain. Functional, not functional, that's not what I'm going to discuss. But we need to purge that pain, those instabilities and those imbalances nonetheless. And this is what this is bringing forth right now. The question is this enough time of purging? And can we now just go through the purification process with a little bit more grace? Or do we still need this to be an upheaval? That's what people haven't fully decided yet. They will within their choices. But most of us are saying enough already with the pandemic and with the political climate that's occurring and will continue to occur over the coming years. We literally are bringing forth one opportunity after another to find our true nature, to align with our flow, and to live with more grace and ease. And as we do that, the transformations will continue. And there will be their difficulties because when you purge an infection, it's a little painful. You wash it out, you clean it up, and you do whatever it needs to be done in order for it to heal properly. So there's time, effort, and attentiveness that we need to place in these things. And that's where we're at. We're at that time right now.
And there's a level of exhaustion, it seems, in many people, as I move through the world. Admittedly, I haven't been traveling because doors are not fully open to travel. But I'm talking to people around the globe, those people that are clients or friends like yourself who are hovering in, and we have Zoom chats. I'd love to extrapolate just slightly on the statement that you were making about Obama. I was actually, because of a member of his administration who I was working with, who was a high-ranking member, I was actually at the inauguration in Chicago and sitting on the high platform and watching the thousands and thousands of people in front. And when he spoke, something very unique resonated through the crowd. And when he said, "We are all one," there was a unique epic. In my ear, it sounded like a thunderclap, but something happened. And I saw, in mystical consciousness, I saw the universal heart chakra, the eighth chakra, ping on in hundreds of thousands of people standing in front. Well, how many people there? I think it was somewhere in the region of about 150,000 people.
Well, it's interesting.
And so he lived that.
Exactly.
But it seems that we as citizens of the American or of the globe, we couldn't live the fullness of that. So he needed to go back into the mystical archetypal zone of the darkness and the perishing nature of COVID, whether it was created in a laboratory or not. It's actually an action within our consciousness. And we have allowed it to breed purely through our fear.
Exactly.
And the wave, the second, I think it's the second or the third wave, it's hitting right now.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think in the United States yesterday, somewhere in the region of 50 to 60,000 people died
Yeah.
of COVID, and
Yeah.
that's across the states. I was listening to news broadcasts this morning, and something similar going on here. So
Yeah.
they're threatening in the major cities. There are localized throughout the north of England, the industrial areas. There are localized lockdowns, but I think there's going to be a lockdown here as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, what can we do to heal not just ourselves, but also whatever we do, because whatever we see on the outside of us is a mirror of what's going on inside. So what can we do? What are the choices? Yolanda says, what are the choices at an individual level?
Mm. First, and I'm very glad you brought up the inauguration, because that was a pronouncement of a truth that he owned at every level of his being. That unleashed into the consciousness of humanity that transformative truth. That is what created the wave that we're in. If we would allow ourselves with consistency to just choose to honor that has been activated for us. You know, it's when different individuals has come onto this earth plane throughout time. There are those that just bring a code in that is a reminder of what we have the ability to become. And they just breathe it into the consciousness at the time. Well, we're at a time now where there are so many people, and the consciousness is richer and fuller than it's ever been. When that kind of an influx comes in, it is a significantly transformative thing, because it would not have come if we were not willing for it to happen and we did not ask for it to happen. It doesn't matter to me what everybody says. Somewhere within that collective soul spirit of us, we said, now is the time. And that was infused. If we can just settle in and feel that nature, that fluid nature, that everything ebbs and flows, but every time that flow comes, it's an opportunity to bring in new nourishment. And then at the same time, when the ebbing, it's a way of releasing what we need to release and send it back for recycling. So if we were to just breathe in that ebb and flow and really feel the exchange, we can utilize that movement pattern as a way of bringing in what we feel will help strengthen us, and then exhale what it is that we feel is timely to release. And if we can have that type of an exchange going on, that creates our own active purification process, but also an activation process.
Beautiful. So I feel that, you know, that in response to Yolanda's question about healing techniques from an individual level, from a very specific level, here we have it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, all of you will be able to extrapolate and, you know, expand on what Ron's suggesting in a very, very specific way. There was something that you said that triggered an aspect of consciousness within me. It's gone as I deal with all of these different things. Um, Amina, who's wonderful, who's from Indonesia but living in Australia, who's a client of mine. I was wondering, you both can speak to blind spots seeking balance and harmony in a potential or current counterpart. Can we sometimes overlook or justify certain behaviors when a spiritually ideal relationship is sought out? Well, the answer is yes.
Yeah, of course.
So really what we need to do is take away the blinkers, don't we?
Yeah.
And you know, oh, I know what it was, that, you know, as
Yes.
I describe these features, that they're very dramatic,
Mhm.
and that, you know, as a result, there's an epic shock value for
Yes.
us individually and collectively, because we're living in at extreme times. You know, as
Mhm.
in the words of one of America's great pastors, Joel Osteen, when the going gets tough, the tough needs to get going. That, you know, really what we need to do again is infused in the breath connection with spirit. Thank you, Tracy. Is our way in to recognizing that we can be healing quotients as we observe all of this. But what we need to do is detach, feel stillness, and observe. and not constantly become swayed in the way that you were talking about, survival mode.
Right.
And the insight was, we've been on this planet for 200,000 years,
Hmm.
and the planet will look after us because the
Hmm.
planet always has. What we know we need to do is to be really respectful of what the action of our respect and our grace can be.
Right.
And then automatically something very specific opens up for us. Wonder if there are any more questions. Pronouncements about truth and consistency. Truth. Could that be a step? Yeah, sure. We had such a virus in 2009, and now what? It was fake. Do you remember? Oh yeah, we all remember the SARS virus. Well, so let's touch on COVID, because we know that it's probably a man-made phenomenon.
Hmm.
But at the same time, what's interesting is that we live in the process of duality still, that
Right.
even if it is a contextualized phenomenon
Hmm.
to bring about dismay, division, chaos, and fear,
Hmm.
but we also know that we're seeing that it has an archetypal force behind it that is creating a wave of such vast change in our lives. I mean, global pause. I refuse to call it lockdown. Global
Yeah.
pause is a
Pause.
perfect
Hmm.
illustration of it, because you and I talked through that we were exploring a level of bliss that we have actually always yearned for on planet Earth, the level of quietness. So we know that there was actually a huge spiritual significance about that. And I don't feel that that was just clever internal politics saying, oh, I better make the best of a bad deal. Crisis equals opportunity. No, something huge was actually happening, because many people were describing this. Do you have
Hmm.
anything that you can comment on in relation to COVID?
Well, it's interesting
As
because,
an,
because COVID came at the perfect time to get us to go inward so we could actually stop being so busy with our doing and our distractions with each other that we could stop long enough to become aware of where our strengths and our weaknesses are. To complain if we wished to, but instead go in and ask ourselves, where am I losing myself to the way that we're told we're supposed to live? This is an opportunity to stop long enough to realize everything I do is going to affect somebody else out there. We ignored that for a long time. And we kept trying to, in very subtle ways, help us realize that cause-effect dynamic that exists. This now brought us to an option of no option, but to really pay attention to how are my actions going to influence somebody around me? I mean, obviously we're looking at it from a COVID perspective, but you and I both know this is more emotional dynamics than it is anything else. And then in turn, the biology is affected as a result of the emotional instabilities. So what a better way to do it than to introduce a virus that when it comes into the system is going to show us where all of those biological weaknesses are as a result of the emotional instabilities that disrupted the integrity of our cellular matrices and the different systems of the biology. So all of this is just opening us up to say, okay, how do I truly wish to be? Do I wish to be present enough that everything I'm saying, everything I do has an influence? And who do I want to be and how do I want to be in this? And how do I get there? And this is where a lot of people.
you have to say that again, please.
Really?
Can you repeat?
Which part did you want me to?
Just the last three phrases, because they were just so crucial that I just wanted you to repeat them. Is it possible? Because I know you were in full flow.
Yeah, when I'm in flow like that, it's like, whoa. Sorry.
Paraphrase. It doesn't.
Yeah, I think
talking about the biological container, the
yeah,
inner environment.
it's realizing that when we allow ourselves to recognize who we are, if we own that, the biology becomes a perfect reflection of what we have the ability to be.
Mm.
But when we live in such a state of disharmony, we are given the opportunity to transcend that. We have to make a decision.
Mm.
Who and how and what do I wish to be in this world? Do I wish to address the imbalances and the instabilities that I harbor and hide from myself, and then, i.e., the world? Do I wish that to continue to have the hold on me that it does? Or am I willing to expose what that is to myself so I can put that wound to rest? So I can clean it up and then bring a better version of myself forward. Not that anything before was bad, it's just it was one version. Do I wish to bring an improved version through life experience and evolution? Because all of this is about the evolutionary process of the manifestation of our existence. Every choice we make, if we fully take it in, we reject none of what we go through. It brings about the next level of who we are from moment to moment. That's the evolutionary process. And this is pushing us into that natural state of being.
And as you say, the options were cancelled by it not being optional. It was not
Exactly.
something that we
Yeah.
seemingly overtly chose. And you know, I am reminded of the fact that there is a kinship with what we're all experiencing collectively. And we know that there's something very unique about this social phenomenon in the sense that for the first time, it's
Yeah.
global, rather
Exactly.
associated with nationhood. So that really what we're experiencing from a mystical point of view is the spiritual madness that so many of the great sages and wisdom keepers have
Yeah.
spoken about, going all the way back into the origins of Kabbalah, of Sufism, of Rosicrucianism. But if we just touch on Meister Eckhart and Hildegard von Bingen and St. John of the Cross, that they actually wrote about, and Teresa of Avila, they
Right.
wrote about the long dark night of the soul. So that
Yeah.
one of our wonderful people listening in, Jackie, was talking about, is it a breakdown or a breakthrough? Well, in spiritual terms, of course, it's always a breakthrough, isn't it?
Exactly.
And of course, what's interesting is that we knew where to go because religious organization was such that there was still the ability for us to recognize a credo of the fact that church was sanctuary or convent monastery was sanctuary, and they knew how to hold us when we went through spiritual madness because they weren't responsible for the efficacy of our emotional development
Right.
in relation to what the family relationships were all about. So this is what's actually, and Julian of Norwich, exactly, going through the same thing. Any other questions? So lots of wonderful conferring with us, with being rather brilliant. So that's really lovely. Any more questions from anybody? Because our time, unfortunately, is coming to a close. I don't see any questions. What's the best way? Thank you, John. What's the best way to try and maintain one's serenity during these complicated times? He's a very dexterous gentleman, right?
And I very much appreciate this question.
Living in Florida. Really.
It really always comes back to engaging in anything that will help you reestablish your communion with yourself. Spirit, body, communion. Go out into nature. Spend time, sit with a tree, walk on the grass barefoot if you can. Engage if you can be near an ocean or just a small stream or river. Be with the natural flow, the natural breath that occurs. And remember that as you breathe, the universe breathes you. And if you breathe, you're breathing the universe. So if we can tap into that, we start taking it to the larger aspect of what we are. We tap into that infinite nature. And then we can bring that infinite potential into this finite body. At least for now, it's finite. And then we have the opportunity to start looking at the reality we created based on the instabilities. And then we begin to create a reality based on a cosmic truth. And as we do that, then no matter what goes on, and we become more proficient at that realignment and recentering, we can walk through anything.
Brilliant. You know, I keep being reminded of a movie which is from about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more, John Travolta movie. This is not being superficial, it's actually really quintessential and in alignment with what we're talking about. It's called Phenomenon.
Phenomenon.
Do you remember
I
Phenomenon?
do. Phenomenon. Yep, I do.
And for those of you who are unaware, just very, very quickly, I'll try and synthesize. Here is an ordinary man living in rural California, somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And it's his birthday. And he's celebrating it in the bar with his friends. Too much beer is drunk. And then he leaves because I think he's thrown out of the bar because of being slightly drunken, or it's closing time, whatever. And he walks out into the the rural nature of town, and he looks up thinking, this is my birthday, and he sees way off a bright light, doesn't he?
Yep.
And then the light gets closer and closer and closer and then comes into him. So he collapses. Obviously an extraterrestrial intelligence has entered him. And then when he wakes, to cut a long story short, he discovers he has remarkable abilities, doesn't he? Where he's able to read a book, and it could be in Chinese or Mandarin. He could speak it fluently. Whereas before, he's been slow-witted, shall we say.
Yes.
And gradually, the intensity of the experience becomes so rich that he knows he's going crazy. And there's that one particular scene where he arrives at his home. He somehow drives to his home. And then he's going absolutely crazy with this energy in his consciousness. And then he hears wind in the tree next to his ranch or his home, and somehow walks towards the tree and sits under the tree, listening to the wind in the leaves, and the whole process calms down.
Yep. He found his flow.
He found the flow. He reunited with the flow. And that moment onwards, he was completely stabilized, wasn't he?
Yes.
In the movie. Yep. And then the rest of the story peters out. So do watch. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming through. Bless you. You're saying such beautiful things. We're being told how much that we're loved. And
thank you.
John, was there anything now on vacation in North Georgia? Mountains, loving reconnecting with nature. Thank you. Yeah, reconnecting with nature. Bless you. Oh, you're in the northern mountains of Georgia. Right. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. And of course, dear Ron Damico, that was amazing. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Profound, profound statements. Thank you so much for sharing this platform with me. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tune out now, but Ron, stay where you are, please. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a really good day, and see you next Monday, when I will be talking to another fascinating gentleman in the form of John Burgos about Beyond the Ordinary. So please do go to Ron's website, rondamico.com. I think you have the spelling in front of you from the flyer. And much love. Thank you. Such an enjoyable time.